And she says, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm childhood friends with Elaine. We went to the same boarding school together. And I'm sitting there watching the snowflakes at the windshield going, what are the odds of that? Pretty crazy. And so I think I know two Ugandans, and they're both in the room tonight. And I'm going to just brag a little bit about Sheila, because frankly, we're in the presence of a miracle. She made her way out of Uganda and to the highest levels of education in the U.S., and then went on to work for some of the top tech firms in the Bay Area here in the corporate world. And so she'll tell you more about that story and kind of some details behind that. But Sheila, if I could turn it over to you, maybe ask you a question. Kind of how did you get involved in Musizi in the first place and Uganda?
Thank you, Leo, for that. So my commitment to education is rooted in a belief that this is the right thing to do, but it's also deeply personal for me. I was born in Kampala, Uganda, raised by a single mother who believed that, for me, educating her children was a non-negotiable. She made sure that I attended the best schools in Uganda, including an all-girls Catholic school, boarding school, where I met Elaine as kids. And so, funny enough, many years ago, Elaine would come to me and tell me about Musizi, and she invited me on this journey. My mom was a single mom. When I was going through school, she was a small business owner and operating in a small economy, unstable economy in Uganda with unguaranteed income. And yet her commitment to educating her kids. So really what I wanted to touch on was that my upbringing in Uganda was one that was driven by my mom and insisting that I would go to school even though the resources were limited. When I was 17, I applied to the United World College program. I don't know if you're familiar with that. Well, some people are, that's amazing. But for those who are not, it's an international boarding school with 14 campuses around the world based on the International Baccalaureate. At the time that I applied, there were 4 spots in all of Uganda. 4 spots for 200,000 kids. And that, the odds were low. But my mom insisted that I apply, which didn't surprise me because my mother had big dreams for us that were bigger than the size of her wallet for as long as I could remember. So anyway, I applied, and unbelievably, I got this scholarship that changed everything for me. That one yes changed everything. And it was from United World College in the UK that I ended up in McAllister in St. Paul, and then at MIT to study electrical engineering and computer science. That's where I got my master's and PhD. And then after that, moved to California and started my career in consumer electronics and the autonomous driving space, working and leading camera development in those 2 spaces. And I'm here where I am because of many reasons. I didn't get here on my own. My mother, with her determination, was a big force for me. My teachers and my mentors were others. But undeniably, it was access to scholarships and access to higher quality education that changed everything for me. And so that's why I'm very, I feel very strongly and very motivated to be a part of Musizi.
That's great, Sheila. Thanks for sharing that story with us. One thought comes to mind. What are your thoughts about kind of Ugandans being educated in country versus going overseas for further education?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I think about a lot. I had to leave Uganda to pursue this great opportunity to better my life, but also to make my family proud. But that came at a quiet cost. You start to realize that, you think you you're coming to the US for school for a couple of years, you're going to do something great, something meaningful, and after a few years, you're going to go back home and share the rewards of that. But before you know it, time has passed, and your life in the US is now your new reality. And so when I think about the cost of that, I think about connecting with my family over, phone screens and the holidays that are too short for me to connect meaningfully with them. It didn't have to come at that higher cost. Like I wish I had higher quality education in Uganda. So when Elaine told me about Musizi, I thought to myself, she's doing the thing that I wish we had. And I think about where Africa is going. The young leaders, the innovators, they're going to come from Africa with the population growth where it's going. And so we better get them prepared. We better get them to think critically and lead ethically. And that's what Musizi is positioning itself to provide that opportunity. And I wish that something like that existed when I lived in Kampala.
Yeah, that's great. And how about what people in this room who aren't necessarily from Africa or in Africa, why should this be important to them?
I think this is important because we're in this global moment that's undeniable. And the critical thinking and the ethical leadership that the humanities promote, that's under attack from all sides. So this is not a Ugandan problem, it's not an African problem. It affects all of us, in thinking about how we structure our governance, our policy, how we have understanding, a global understanding of one another. And all of that, all comes together. And so I think about how critical it is that we think beyond Africa's problems and really understand that there are collective problems. And the other question that I think about is, maybe you guys might be wondering in the room, why did one of us invite you here tonight? Why me? How did I land on this invite list? And I think each one of us has had a moment in our lives that changed our trajectory. I know education changed my trajectory, and I don't think it's a stretch to think that any one of us in this room can make a significant impact by either giving us an idea, like Neil asked at the start of this session, to think about what quality education would look like, and through that, we'll make meaningful change.
That's great, thank you, Sheila. It might turn our attention to Elaine now, and so just I'm honored to introduce you, Elaine. Elaine, she's born and raised in Kampala as well, and at some point she realized that Uganda needed more high-quality, affordable K-12 schools, and a lot of moms would kind of find a private school and send their kids to it. Elaine didn't do that. She decided to form her own K-12 school, not just for her own children, but for others. All while she was kind of busy with her law career and raising 4 children. That school, she'll get into this in more detail, the North Green School in Kampala. Not to steal your thunder, Elaine, but it started humble beginnings with 30 students and grew to over 700 in 8 short years. And there's a lot of people that dream of starting a school in Africa, but there's very few that actually have 8 years of successful and sustainably profitable operating experience in doing so. That's a huge kind of de-risking factor for me when I was kind of looking at the school. So Elaine, with that background, again, if you could just kind of share with us, I know you built the North Green School. In some ways, maybe this is an extension of that, but if you could share with us that moment where you thought it's time to actually do the next step and start a university.
Thank you very much, Neil. And it would be remiss of me, and first of all, thank you all for being here. And this is completely off what I had thought we would say, but we have a Ugandan proverb that says, "Nanyini mufu yakwata wazito," which means when you've lost a relative, and you have to carry. We didn't have these funeral service things that you have here. You had to carry, the funeral rites, you'd have to do it yourself. And usually the family members would be the ones to carry the heavier part of the corpse. So when I sit in this room, other than Sheila, who really also has, as she said herself, has another life here. You guys are sitting here giving of your time. So if we were to count how much time is being spent on this event, we have more time of people who are not from Uganda in this room, and that's extremely moving for me. So thank you so much for being here. Sandra, it would also be remiss of me to tell that story without thinking about Sheila. Because every time I hear Sheila's story, it moves me because I was there for the start of it. Sheila and I went to the same high school, Mount St. Mary's, Namagunga. And I'm told there's somebody in the room, Victoria, who taught there.
She wasn't able to make it.
Oh, she wasn't able to
but she
make
taught at our school in the 60s.
In the 60s, yeah, and she was supposed to be here, but I think something came up. Also, what are the chances of that? There's somebody in the Bay Area who taught at Namagunga in the 60s. This is mind-blowing for me. But one of the things that Namagunga did was that it taught us the importance of agency, the importance of hard work, the importance of discipline, the importance of doing your absolute best, not because anyone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. And Sheila, she embodied that spirit. So when she got the scholarship to UWC and she ended up at MIT, we were all cheering in the background because in some way, we had this quiet hope. She carried us with her. And really, she did. She's done us proud. I mean, how many... Let me not even start that because, Sheila doesn't like it when I do this, but I do this all the time. Like, have you seen our girl? Have you seen what she's doing? But seriously, she did. And we're immensely proud of her. But I often thought about the other girls in the class, the 120 of us, equally diligent, equally disciplined, equally, it wasn't an ability gap, it was an access gap. Access to a system that, pushed you to be independent-minded, to be a critical thinker, a system that gave you mentors that actually had the capacity to form you into something. We didn't have that access. And so this question, how to increase the access of this sort of education that Sheila had got to more people, is something that remained with me for many years. In any case, I myself had continued to go to law school at Makerere University, which is one of the best universities in the country, still remains one of the best universities on the continent. However, the experience of what I found versus, how they say client budget versus client expectation. The expectation did not meet the event. I went with this expectation that I was going to law school, we were going to change the world, we were going to learn all these practical things and all these problems that, you have a president who said Uganda is a shithole country. But, my thoughts were that by being in law school, we could change some of these things. But what I found when I was there was rote learning, notes at the photocopier, lecturers who would be irritated by students who asked too many questions, being, earmarked as a troublesome student because you were asking about how things could be done differently. It just felt like we had been put into a system where we were supposed to just glide through, pass the exams, get the degree and get out. So there wasn't any real mind forming that happened there. So years later, my sisters who come after me, our family is quite widely spaced. So my sister who comes after me came 5 years later. My parents were like, let's try and do this differently. And so they chose to send her abroad. But that came at a massive cost, which my family, to this day, has not recovered from. After my parents working for over 30 years, they sold everything, their assets, their land. And in Africa, family land is a big deal. This is like just about the only wealth we have. And all of that was sold. And even then we needed aunties, cousins, uncles to contribute to my sister's education. Anyway, and this was because they believed that the best way to get a quality education was to send somebody abroad. And so my sisters went. And they did get a quality education. And they came back home, which is a whole different story about coming back home when you have been, everything has been sold and you're expected to remain in that economy and get the value of that education. And indeed, when my sisters came home, this proved true, because entry salaries were about $200. And even when you were diligent and you worked really hard, it would take you up to almost 6 to 10 years for that $200 to move to $600. Yes. But even when we don't talk about the reward in terms of cost-benefit ratio, just the frustration. So my youngest sister is an environmental engineer. She studied in Australia. And when she came back, she's a civil and environmental engineer. When she came back, she also struggled with context. Going to sites, and as soon as she gets there, she's asking for building codes, she's asking for standards, safety. And people are looking at her and saying, but why are you trying to stir up trouble here? Yeah? Do you see all these buildings? Do you think, are they standing? Why, So it was a difficult thing. And this is the story of so many people who no little wonder they don't come home. I mean, let's think about it. With Sheila's MIT in Photo, what would she come home to do? Even me, I'll be the first at the airport to say, go back. So my sister's experience gave me a realization of this reality, that certain parts of our economy just were not ready to receive the sort of excellence that you get when you get that university degree abroad, because it's just out of context. Just the standards, the habits, the culture just doesn't match up. That's one. But number two, that even where the standard of excellence was something that people were willing to receive, they just couldn't afford it. The economy couldn't afford it. So these two things kind of would feed off of each other and create this circle of doom. But then there was an opportunity in that if you lifted one up, you could lift the other and then create a virtuous cycle. So if you were able to get that quality within the market so that the cost of the sacrifice wasn't so high, then slowly you would be able to raise both. You would be able to raise the quality of standard of the professionals, but by raising the quality of the standard of the professionals in the market, you would also raise the industry standards in the market, and that is how economies change. And what would also be critical is that you then have a critical mass, which you can't have if you keep on sending students for scholarships. Yeah? Because as Sheila and Neil may have mentioned, Uganda is one of the youngest populations in the world. We are a country that is the size of Oregon, with a population slightly bigger than California. And projected to grow to 100 million by 2050, with a median age of 13. Basically, just think about all the demographics that you would just not work, and they're there. So it is not just a good and important thing to do. It is an urgent thing that population is built with a critical mass of people who are independent, critical thinkers, that are empowered to, number one, have the agency to create a change that they want to see. And you know, and I didn't even talk about the North Green School because I'm sorry, I get so taken away. But so that's kind of the background that we were thinking about when 7 years ago, 8 years ago, my husband and I started the North Green School. And there were many sort of pulling factors or pushing factors to that. But one is a bit of a cheeky story which I need to tell you. My oldest son, I have 4 children. My oldest son is 18. Love him to bits. But his school, the boy would come back every term and he had 100%. And I was like, good to know, but I don't quite see this genius that the school is telling me lives in my house. Not to put him down or anything, but how can it be? Maths, English, science, social studies, 100. It happens the first time, like, okay, maybe he was a second time, it's the same thing. But no, I said, no, there's a problem here. Number one, because first of all, this is out of step with what I am seeing in our know, you know? But also, what does that say to a young person? That they know everything, and therefore they cannot be teachable. So I went to inquire in what was actually happening and what was being taught. I thought they were still teaching them the same things they taught me and Sheila when we were in high school. But obviously, a lot had happened over the many years since me and Sheila had been in high school. And that's a conversation for a different day. I can't even get into it because Neil will be like, "Elaine, we need to finish this conversation." But what matters is that it became obvious to me that something needed to be done at the K-12 level to actually have an education that was not just some kind of placebo, you know, take them through the conveyor belt, you know. And I knew it was a conveyor belt because of my son, who they were telling me was a genius. So 8 years ago, my husband and I sold some family land, and we started with 30 students, 8 teachers, and a simple conviction that if we built something that was excellent and rooted in values, families would come, and they did. So 8 years later, we had 700 students, and now the question was, we've taken them up this mountain, and if I must send them back into the place where I was for university, which by the way has become worse in terms of missing results and rote learning, then we might as well shut down the school and just forget about it, because there'd be no point. Yeah, and that's really where that started. But I think when I tell this story, one of the things that are really critical is the human stories behind it. And so I like to tell the story of a young man called Michael Masigwa. Michael, and I think Sheila is trying to make sure that the screen is working so that they can show you some pictures of of some of those 700 students. But this is Michael. And when Michael walked into the North Green School, we knew he was special. Actually, he reminded me a bit of Sheila. You know that shooting star that shows up and you're like, ah. We have a responsibility to make sure that this star does not lose its luster while it is with us. And indeed, while Michael was with us, he flourished. At his year 11 exams, he got the best grades in sub-Saharan Africa in mathematics. And I thought to myself, what do I do with this boy? Do I send him to Makerere so that he annoys his lecturers? Because by the time he came back for his A-levels, which is the equivalent here of what, senior? The last 2 years of high school, he had privately covered the entire syllabus. Yeah. So we thought we need to do something for Michael, and we were able to, we worked, and he was the first recipient of the RISE scholarship. Michael has now gone to Nottingham University to study medicine. But the question remains, how many bright stars will the world absorb for us? It's just not sustainable. And I think that's where the idea for Musizi came. So it's a bit of a long, winding way to answer your question. But it is the realization that we must build a sky of our own, because we know that we have these bright stars. But we must put them into a sky so that they can shine. Oh. Let Neil, I'll come back to that.
Before I introduce Takako, I was just going to say, Elaine, send your son to Ashesi. We'll make him work hard for some bees. Again, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Takako Mino tonight.
But Neil,
Yeah.
sorry, I
No,
have to
yeah.
take that back. I have to take this back because there will be a problem in the way this story unfolds. So, now that I was asking the question about the bright sky, the sky that we needed to, to build so that we could put our bright stars in there, I happened to speak to somebody who had also gone to the same school, who had actually gone to the same school that Sheila and I had gone to. There's that sound that's coming. And she'd also been in education. So I said to her, we need a university here, our own, to do this thing. And she had been an Aspen Fellow. As an Aspen Fellow, she had attended Aspen with a brilliant Ghanaian who had gone and started a university in Ghana called Ashesi. So, which is the university that Neil helped to start. Isn't that just weird? So I looked up Ashesi and I saw what they were doing, and I looked at their students and the outcomes that their students were sort of doing, and I thought, this is a great model. They are yielding students who are ethical, entrepreneurial, and
Try the other mic.
yeah, let's see. The mic is just so they're coming up with students who are ethical, entrepreneurial, and employable. And I thought to myself, how do I go to Ghana? At the time, the North Green School was 4 years old. I had 4 children, a mother, a father, a sister, in African culture, a husband, a school. I was still in private practice doing my job, and I thought, how do I go to Ghana? Because I want to go to Ghana and learn what this university is doing. And then COVID also hit, just to add a little bit of mix into that, because things were not complicated enough. And then I got a phone call from Ghana, from a young American PhD who was teaching at Ashesi University. And her name was Takako Mino. Now over to you, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, tonight's really, it's about a lot of coincidences, quite frankly. But I was saying that Takako and I are both graduates of a liberal arts college in Southern California, Claremont McKenna College. And my education stopped there. Takako's went on. She got a doctorate in education at the Claremont Graduate School, and then actually went on to teach at Ashesi, which is quite remarkable. Takako has a lot of credentials, so I'm actually going to have to cheat and read some of it. But she's worked for a diverse group of organizations in Uganda, including the Economic Policy Research Center, a leading think tank, the Forum for African Women Educationalists, a Pan-African NGO promoting girls' education, the African Rural University, the first such all-women school in rural Africa, Asante Africa Foundation, which provides education skills and opportunities to East Africans, and she's also worked in the areas of public debate and speaking. I left out probably about 5 organizations, but you get a sense that Takako is eminently qualified to help launch a school in Uganda. But Takako reached out to me about 2.5 years ago, and she shared with me her background in education and the fact that she taught at Ashesi, and then that she was going on to start a university in Uganda. And to be honest with you, for me, that really kind of touched my heart,
the fact that I helped start this school, and a graduate from my alma mater went on to teach there, and then is a founding university to boot. So I thought that kind of helped complete the circle. But as I was thinking about tonight, it actually has opened up the circle again and expanded it. And for that, I'm grateful to Kako. So with that, Takako, as I get all choked up, but it's not obvious that a woman of Japanese descent would go to study in Africa and then start a school in Uganda. If you could share your story about how that came about.
Thank you so much, Neil. And you're going to get me And I really want to thank everybody in this room too. There are actually so many friends of mine here who have heard about this crazy idea from the very beginnings and supported me and cheered me on and continue to support me. So I'm just so happy to see all of you and to meet all of my new friends as well. I also really want to thank our board members who have made all of this possible. Chris, if you want to just stand up and Chris's friend's restaurant is Forge, so this is the reason why we have the space today. So we're so grateful, Chris, for making this possible. And then Prisha, who actually traveled all the way from DC to join us at this event. We really want to thank her too. So yes, you're probably very curious to find out what brought me into this situation. I'll never forget hearing my grandmother share her story of surviving the atomic bomb during World War II that was dropped in Nagasaki, Japan. And despite the tremendous suffering that she went through, sustaining severe burns all over her body, what she didn't want was revenge. She did not want revenge. What she wanted was that no human being ever go through what she went through. No human being deserves to go through war or suffering. So hearing her story and then growing up in a Buddhist household where my parents were continually encouraging me to find out my life's purpose, I grew up thinking about what I could do to contribute to building a more peaceful world. So when I had the chance to study abroad during college, I chose Uganda, which was just emerging from war. And at that time, I had the chance to meet with former child soldiers who were trying to figure out their lives after coming back from war. And what really struck me is that every single one of them wanted to go back to school, even if it meant starting school first grade at 20 years old. And hearing their deep conviction and belief that education would be the way that they can transform not only their lives, but also their communities, just resonated deeply with me as well. As a Japanese immigrant growing up in the US, I really struggled with confidence, and I was that one student in class who never talked. They never raised my hand or anything, but it's because I had amazing teachers and mentors that I was able to actually believe in myself and my potential to make a contribution to this world. So when these young Ugandans shared that same conviction with me, I felt that maybe this is the way that I can help contribute to building a better world and creating the kind of world that my grandmother would have wanted to see. So I had the chance to go back 2 more times to Uganda and work on various education projects. And I saw how extracurricular programs like debate could make a massive impact on young people's confidence. And I think seeing that made me think about, what if there's an entire institution that created that holistic educational experience for students to go through? And how much that would equip young people with the empathy and the agency to be able to transform Uganda from within. So fast forward a bit, I became a teacher, and after teaching in the US and then also getting a PhD, I had the chance to teach at Musizi University, the first liberal arts college of Ghana. And actually one of my former students from Musizi is here, Ernest. He's now studying for his master's degree at UC Berkeley, and we're so proud of him. So I got to witness firsthand how African students can be impacted when they have the opportunity to receive a transformative education. And it made me think about, and it really excited me to think about the possibilities of creating an institution like Musizi in Uganda. And then, well, Elaine told that story, but during the pandemic, I was introduced to Elaine. She was already doing transformative work in the K-12 space, and we basically realized that we had the same dream, and we asked each other, what if we worked on this dream together? So in 2020, I moved over to Uganda, and we've been working on this project ever since. So yes, maybe just to build more on this, the connection with the Shesi has been so invaluable to us because basically instead of reinventing the wheel, we get to stand on their shoulders and learn a lot from their experience. So we're still very plugged into the Ashesi network. We are part of Ashesi's Education Collaborative, which is a Pan-African university network, where we get to learn best practices in curriculum development, student services, staff development, and on a bi-monthly basis, we get to meet with the founder of Ashesi, Patrick Ewa, who's also a Berkeley grad, and learn about how he made Ashesi happen and what we could do to make sure that we create a strong foundation for Musizi. So we continue to learn from Ashesi. So yes, over the last 5 years, largely as a team of 2, we've been able to build the foundations of Musizi and to think through what it would take to build a university tailored to the needs of Uganda. Before we went into curriculum development, we wanted to do market research and we conducted some feasibility studies. So we went out there and spoke to hundreds of people. We spoke to over 500 high school students and 100 parents and employers to find out what they wanted to see in a university education. And then we took that feedback, and then with some help from Claremont McKenna and then Harvey Mudd, we were able to build a liberal arts curriculum that is tailored for those local needs. I also wanted to add that we have one of our interns who helped us do that feasibility study in this room too. Who was an intern from Claremont McKenna who came to help us as our first cohort of interns that summer. So it's amazing how everything is coming full circle in this room. And then we decided to focus on 3 programs. And I'm sorry, so I'm supposed to be showing some visuals that relate to this. But it's okay, maybe we'll just leave it. So we decided to focus on 3 degree programs to start with. First, entrepreneurship. So Uganda is actually the most entrepreneurial country in the world, yet most ventures don't last more than 5 years. So we actually built a curriculum where we take students through the entire enterprise life cycle, including business planning, pitching, launching, scaling, all within a supportive learning environment, along with mentors who have founded businesses themselves, so that they not only graduate with a degree, but also with a business that they can continue to grow. The second degree that we chose is software engineering. Uganda and Africa are digitizing at a mind-boggling rate. So just this year in Uganda, we've had 1 million more new users of internet. So there's just a lot of growing need, and the way that our curriculum is developed, students have the opportunity to go through the software design cycle and process so that they learn how to build tech solutions that can really address all the needs, the growing needs of the Ugandan economy. And then third, we chose health data science. And this is to support the national efforts to digitize Uganda's health sector. And basically what the program does is upskill health professionals so that they have the data analytics skills to be able to support data-driven decision-making to allocate limited resources where they're most needed. So with all this curriculum development, we've been able to engage our future faculty members, including some international faculty who are going to be teaching remotely with us once we open. So we developed the curriculum with all of this support. But then we also have to think about how would high school students learn about us and even know about Musizi. When we thought about the ideal high school student and the ideal candidate for Musizi, somebody who is ethical, creative, and self-driven, we realized that this would be very difficult to find within an education system that is based on rote learning. So we realized we had to start earlier. We started the Musizi Wings program, which now partners of 7 high schools and has 50 fellows, mostly girls from low-income backgrounds, and equips them with leadership skills and the different liberal arts skills that they would need in order to be able to thrive in a liberal arts environment in the future. So these are all our potential future Musizi students who are eagerly waiting for Musizi to start. Then on the other side, we also have to think about another critical gap, which we decided to address by starting the Musizi Sustainable Business Institute. A gap that we have is that students don't really have local business cases to learn from, so we decided to fill that gap ourselves. In the past year, we've been able to write 40 African business cases, and then also engage 100 business leaders who are our future employers and mentors of Musizi students. So basically what we've tried to do with this WINGS program and also with the Musizi Sustainable Business Institute is create an ecosystem of support around the university. We now have pathways that young people can take to get into Musizi, and then we also have pathways for when they graduate from Musizi, creating a virtuous cycle with positive feedback loops that keep on supporting each other.
Yeah.
You know, Elaine, we've talked about kind of your founding the North Green School and kind of the story behind you beginning Musizi. We've heard about the curriculum. Maybe you could expand on the business plan a little bit, some of the nuts and bolts of the school.
Yeah. So, one of the first times that I talked to somebody about doing this sort of thing in Uganda, the first thing they told me is that you don't know or understand the cost of education. They were sort of implying that what you need is a basic education to be able to read prescriptions from the pharmacist so that you stay alive. You don't need anything deeper than that. But the case for why this is necessary has been. And also by running the North Green School, we learned that if you did create something that was valuable, people would be willing to pay for it. But our desire is not that we create Musizi so that only people that can afford to be at Musizi are at Musizi, because then that defeats the whole purpose of why we are doing this. And that way we do not build a critical mass. So we've priced our tuition fees at $5,000 a year, which is a fraction of what the scholarship, for example, for Michael, or I'm sure even many, many years ago, that's still a fraction of what it costs to educate Sheila here abroad. And so families that can afford to pay that will pay it. But we will still run a scholarship model so that students who qualify to be at Musizi because they are smart can have access. We're talking about girls who we still have that problem where girls are not given priority to get access to education. But also young boys from low-income families. Uganda has one of the highest refugee populations in Africa. We basically receive around. I'm sure you know your president was trying to send someone who we didn't think was a refugee. That's a conversation for another day.
You're in Oakland, you're in safe territory.
Am I in safe hands? Like, will ICE show up? Anyway, but that just goes to show the nature of the country that we are. We receive a lot of people. And when these refugees come, they also, I think, deserve an opportunity to access to good education. And that's why we are going to have a strong scholarship model, so that we will admit to Musizi students who qualify to be at Musizi, not necessarily students who can't pay to be at Musizi. And what's also wonderful is that there's things that we've been able to do. Kako will show you. Through the growth story of the North Green School, and I didn't tell you a lot about that because today is not about the North Green School, it's about Musizi. But in the process of our 8 years of growth, we outgrew some of our buildings, which we had already converted into classrooms. And so some of those buildings, like this one in particular, has been inherited by Musizi. Of course, Musizi has done a little bit of razzmatazz to it, to make it more their kind of thing. And that's our building. But in the years to come, because the North Green School is seated across 6 different properties in this suburb where we sit, we will, as we go on to build our purpose-built school, we will hand over these buildings slowly as Musizi grows over to Musizi. And I think that's an exciting thing because actually, as the North Green School, I wish I was Musizi. I wish there was someone handing me these buildings as I was growing. So I think that's an exciting thing that's going to be possible for Musizi. This is currently our high school. We're still in it at the moment. And one interesting thing, when we were taking on this building, this is the last of the buildings that we acquired. And I think Emery was there by the time. Had we taken it on? Yeah, she was. And I remember when we were taking this on as the North Green School. At that point, we had already met Musizi. There's no way if Musizi were a person. And when we were remodeling this building to make it into a school building for the North Green School, we were thinking about Musizi and saying, what would it need to look like so that it would work for Musizi as a building. So we really look forward to when we get out of this building, because we know that it will be put in good hands, and it will be put to really good use. So I don't know if that answers,
that's great. Thank you.
answers that question. Yeah.
That's great, Elaine. Thank you for that.
There's also perhaps two things that I would like to say about Musizi. Takako, if you just go back to the one before, to the slide before that.
This one. Okay.
Yes. So that small little building that you've seen, which we've already handed over to Musizi, it has capacity at most for 50 students. And we think this is important because from my experience with the North Green School starting with 30 students, you need a proof of concept, you know. There's a lot of iterations that happen, you know, even now, even with all the 5 years of planning. We know that when we actually hit the ground running, there will be a lot of things that we will realize, you know, looked very good on paper, but now in action isn't quite what we expected. And so that building will be able to take 50 students, and that should be in 2026, because as we speak today, we have been through a rigorous accreditation process. The accreditation process in Uganda is a 3-step process, but we are happy to announce that we just paid our license fees. That's a nice place to camp. And now we are just working through some small little adjustments that we've been asked to make, and we should receive our license in the next, few months. And that should allow us to admit our first students in September of 2026. So that's an exciting time. We then hope that, by 2028, because to move that, in 2026, the license that will be given is what they call a provisional license. So it allows you to get your students and start issuing degrees. But within a certain period of time, you must get a full charter. To get a full charter, you must own your own land, okay? Which land we've identified, and hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, it will still be available for us to acquire. So we hope that by 2028, we will have grown to 200 students, and we will have acquired the land, and we would have moved into 4 facilities. We would now at that point have 4 facilities. These are the facilities that the North Green School is currently in. In February this year, next year, the North Green School will break ground for its own purpose-built school. So we will start handing over these properties slowly. We hope that by 2030, we will begin now our campus development on our own land as Musizi, which we hope to complete by 2032, at which point we will have about 1,000 students. Now, 1,000 students in a country of 41 million still seems like a drop in the ocean, but this work must start somewhere. And we really believe in the ripple effect of things. I mean, just think about the ripple effect of the people that started Mount St. Mary's Namagunga, where Sheila and I went. And that school took only 700 students. Think of the ripple effect of UWC that gave 4 scholarships to 200,000 young Ugandans. Which one of those scholarships Sheila took? So sometimes the numbers might look bleak in comparison, but what we are looking for is impact. And if our work is deep enough, which we believe it will be, these 1,000 students that we will send out every year will eventually create a ripple effect, and that ripple effect will ultimately give us the critical mass that we need. And this question around a critical mass is very important. Sheila has been so kind to host me at her house. She didn't know that I'm going to say this. And, you know, as I walked into her neighborhood, I noticed that everybody, you know, in their little community, you know, took very good care of their properties, and everything is nicely painted, and there are little plants. And I wondered whether there is somebody who, like a, what would I call it? Like a whip who makes sure and says, make sure you have plants, make sure you paint your doors. And I realized, of course not. But what it is that everybody on that block has the same mindset, the same desires, right? They have a collective conscience that makes sure that they are able to run their, what do you call this in America? There's a name for it. Their community.
Housing communities. Yeah.
Their housing communities to a certain standard, right? No, like their housing community to a certain standard. It's the collective conscience of them. And I realized that that's how nations rise to a certain standard. That people generally have what they believe to be the acceptable standard of what things should be, you know? And the more people you have thinking in a certain direction, the more certain you are of moving not just the housing community, not just the district, not just the state, I think that's what people are now trying to convert, and ultimately not just the country in a certain direction. And this work must be intentional. So when we look at the ripple effects that we expect to see from Musizi, we expect that by raising the standards of our graduates, okay, we will see that they will get employment in dignified jobs. And those jobs will be dignified because the employers will be willing to pay for their services, because they will be doing the work at the standard that the employers are also equally benefiting, right? And we will see that the students will be ethical and they will be innovative. It creates a virtuous cycle, a lever for change. But beyond that, it also transforms industry and makes the industry standards rise altogether. Yeah? And this is how countries change. Now, I like to say that in some ways, these things that we are doing are not mind-boggling, earth-shattering, mission to the moon things. They are just the natural cycle of life. They are that's how economies evolve. And so the work that we are doing, it was going to happen at some point. At some point, countries like Uganda, for example, were going to wake up and question the education system that they had that was handed over to them by the British. I have nothing against them. They were also doing what was best for them, and I would have maybe done the same. But how long must we stay under that? So it was inevitable that after 65 years, a time was going to come and people were going to say, we now need to find something that works for us, and they were going to be intentional about determining what that collective conscience looks like. And so that brings me to the name of Musizi. You see, the Musizi is a tall tree, very much like that one that you see in the background. It grows tall, it grows straight, and you can see it from the distance, like the ethical students that we want to have, like the exemplary students, like Sheila. I mean, even in me being in Uganda, I could still see her shining tall here. Like Michael Mwesigwa, who we've sent to Nottingham. Like Takako, who Claremont sent to Uganda, Like Amory, who spent her time with us, Like Ernest, who is the tall tree that is now at Berkeley. We're proud of you. So the Musizi tree is planted amongst coffee plantations to give just the right amount of shade to make sure that the coffee trees under it thrive. And because it's subtle, birds tend to perch on it and drop their seeds around it. And so because of that, it is called the sowing tree. The word Musizi in almost 20, 30 different languages in Uganda means to sow, to be a sower. And our hope is that our students shall be catalysts of change and growth, yeah? Just like all of you in this room today. You see, by being here, you are sowing your time for a work that is inevitable, that is going to happen. Either we will do it, or it will be done because its time has come. But what a privilege that we get to be the ones to do it. And what a privilege that you being here tonight get to be a part of that story. And I just want to thank you for being Musizi today.
So there are gifts for you on the way out, and we're going to explain the meaning of these gifts as before that.
Okay. So we welcome any questions that you guys have. Wonderful. Hey, Mark.
So between a set sheet
yeah.
in North Green, you folks have an incredible knowledge base on how to do this and how to fund it. What are the finances of your organization and where can you use help?
Okay, so we at the North Green School, we started with a seed capital from the family land that we sold of $30,000. Today we've grown to a turnover of $3 million. This is what has allowed us to, I would say, carry, in, for lack of a better word, Musizi to where it is today, and to be able to hand over some of these buildings, for which we hold the underlying lease. So we will maintain those leases until Musizi is able to be on its feet and have its own students and then take over. But also one of the things that we know is we know the pricing model. So the $5,000 per year was based on what our final senior year high school students are paid. And in fact, interestingly, Musizi is cheaper than what our high school students pay. But this is because obviously we've received a lot of support from, for example, adjunct faculty here in the US that are
Volunteering.
who are volunteering of their time to teach. All the classes in that new building that you see have been set up with equipment to allow remote lectures to take place where the students are able to see the lecturer. That's usually easy in this day and age, but usually what's not necessarily easy is for the teacher to see the students and to be able to hear them and whatever. And we've managed to get the equipment to be able to do that. And Takako can talk more about how many adjunct professors that we have.
Yes, and also to just share more about how we've been able to finance ourselves so far. We've been able to start a 501c3 in the US, and that has enabled us to have charitable donations, from individuals and family foundations that have helped us really seed a lot of this work. So far, we've raised about $250,000. And then I would say probably we've gotten in-kind support of an additional $250,000 of sometimes, for example, the Claremont colleges sponsoring interns to come and provide amazing support that have just propelled us forward so much faster than just us doing it by ourselves.
Yeah.
And then also sometimes volunteer faculty as well. So this is how far we've gotten, but definitely we know that in terms of starting up and being able to hire the core faculty who will be the administrators, and then really run this, we need to fundraise as well. So right now we're also fundraising towards our seed capital to be able to hire those people. And we want to ideally raise about $500,000. But even at a minimum of $250,000, we believe that we can get started. have tuition from the students help support, and basically have most students paying tuition, probably maybe about 80% pay tuition, 20% on scholarship. And then hopefully as we build our capacity along the way and hopefully start an endowment fund along the way, then we can increase the percentage of students on scholarship over time. So that's kind of how our financing looks now and what we're hoping to achieve more in the future.
And also, we have been a part, as I said, as Takako said, we've been a part of the Education Collaborative, which is this network that Ashesi set up to raise the standard of other universities across Africa in 4 main areas. One was how to make sure that their students are ethical, entrepreneurial, and employable, and the 4th one was on staff development, so that the staff would basically achieve these 4 things. Through the Education Collaborative, a partnership with the Education Collaborative, we were able to do the 40 business case studies, studying 40 African family businesses across East Africa, 10 in Rwanda, 10 in Kenya, 10 in Tanzania, and 10 in Uganda. And what's interesting about that is that through the support of the Education Collaborative, those case studies will now be shared not just at Musizi, but also across universities that are part of the Education Collaborative. And we believe that this is generally going to help improve the sustainability of African businesses on the continent. So I think one of the wonderful things about being a part of Ashesi is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have to figure out what do scholarships look like. How do you sustain it? How many students should be on scholarship? How many students should be paying? What foundations do we need to look out for that are able to support us with scholarships? At what point do we reach out to those foundations? Because there's also a critical aspect of the when. So some of these things have been really, really helpful to us. And as we said, we meet the founder of Ashesi University, Takako, and I, for the last
Year and a half.
almost year and a half, 2
Yeah,
years,
maybe 2
have
years.
met with the founder of Ashesi University twice every month. But more importantly, for the last 4 years, we have incubated in the Education Collaborative. So a lot of things around just the modeling, the operations, how to make it work, how to manage the finances, how to set up the governance structures, the boards and everything have been strongly under the guidance of Ashesi.
Maybe I could just elaborate on that a little bit. Mark, that's a great question, and kind of brought me back. I got involved with Ashesi in 2000 when I was 35 years old. The head of HR at Microsoft at the time asked me to review it from a business plan standpoint. I had no idea about running a school, let alone starting one in Africa, but I was so impressed by the business plan, how well thought out it was, and by the leadership qualities of Patrick Awa. So 25 years later, you know, I do know a thing or two about running a school in Africa now. There was a lot of trial and error. I was the treasurer for the first decade when we didn't know if we were gonna make it. Coincidentally, we too started with 30 students in cobbled together rental homes in the coastal capital of the Accra. We kind of converted bedrooms into classrooms, and we didn't get our permanent campus until about 9 years into it. So when I was asked to review the business plan, candidly I was blown away by how well thought out it was, and how many pieces to the puzzle are in place. This project is way further along than Ashesi was when it launched. Our business model, which is similar to theirs, is to raise capital for the physical plant buildings, and then the institution is self-sustainable based on tuition and dormitory rents. So to me, that was critical, kind of the self-sustainability of it. And again, I've come to call this the Just Add Water project. That to play on the tree analogy, they've tilled the soil, they've grown it to a sapling. This can be a big tree with water being investment capital. but we're not talking about a heavy lift here, and there's a huge opportunity. We've talked a lot about a chassis, but just to give you a sense of what's possible, we started with 30 students, we're now up to 1,500. 50% of those are on financial aid, 25% are on full rides, and I'm proud to say 50% are women. And we're heavy on computer sciences and engineering, so we're way ahead of the game on that, which is great. We offer 6 degrees. It's things like business, computer sciences, engineering. And we also have a joint master's program in mechatronics engineering jointly with ETH Zurich, which is one of the leading universities in Europe. And early on, a lot of the funding for a chassis came from private individuals. Patrick was an executive at Microsoft, so a lot of the early support came from Microsoft execs and former execs, and then we kind of spread out across the country. As Elaine kind of touched on, we kind of had to get critical mass in our permanent campus before we really started attracting institutional dollars. And one of our biggest partner by far and away is the MasterCard Foundation. The MasterCard Foundation was started with some pre-IPO stock that was worth $600 million, which today that corpus is $40 billion. And so they helped us with scholarships from 2007 onwards, but they also substantially endowed the school a few years ago. I'm on the investment committee. We now manage a $320 million endowment. Incidentally, Rich Lyons was on our board. Patrick went to Haas School of Business to get retooled, and also did feasibility studies in the summer, bringing some fellow Berkeley students down with him. But after Rich stepped down from being dean, he joined our board. It was great working with him, and then he and I were on the investment committee and the sub-ESG committee, and I actually talked to him about this night, and he invited Maya, so we're happy that Maya's here today from SIGA. But so, again, to me, when I reflect back, I remember I introduced Henry Skip Gates Jr. at a talk. He was the head of African and African American Studies at Harvard and then Yale. He said, Shessie, this was when we were at Blueprint. He said, this is an absolutely crazy idea, but it's so crazy it just might work. And he was right. And this, again, is just way further baked than we were. And so it's not totally route finding. Patrick actually had a meeting with President Carter about 20 years ago, and it's when we were thinking about starting new schools around Africa. And President Carter said, well, you're not really in the business of bricks and mortar, you're in the business of propagating your curriculum. And as Sheila mentioned, the default mode of education in Africa is rote memorization. And rote memorization doesn't give you leadership skills. And Africa needs leadership skills, it needs ethical leadership skills. And you get there through a liberal arts education based on critical thinking, based on interdisciplinary learning and creativity. You need that. You need leadership to build a business, you needed to build a school, and you needed to build a country. And if it's not grounded in a commitment to service and ethics, you're nowhere. And Africa is nowhere. So, this is all the stuff I was looking at when I was looking at their business plan. And again, it's all there. So we're excited to get behind it. It's going to take early private investment to get it to critical mass. There's a lot of institutions that have dollars to help it scale once it's kind of established itself.
Thanks so much for sharing your stories. It's been so nice to be here. I have two kind of interrelated questions. So I'm from the Center for Effective Global Action at UC Berkeley, and part of what we are really interested in is like knowledge influencing policy. And so I'm interested in how your relationship is with the government generally. Like, is there any potential for projects that students and faculty to take on that could actually end up making its way into policy. And then I'm also curious in a related way about, I saw your theory of change, which was really well laid out, and I saw entrepreneurship, and I think I saw employment on there. And I was wondering how you think about producing kind of knowledge generators. So Amy and I have been working on this for a long time of like, there's this huge issue that only 2% of the papers that are written about African development are actually written by African scholars. And so I'm really curious about how you think about nurturing those voices, how you think about research and PhDs at the same time while getting people into the job market. So how do we produce the next generation of knowledge generators? So if you guys could.
Could I build on that just because
Yeah.
it's my wonderful boss? Yeah, so to that end, I was curious, to what extent do you see yourself at the intersection between the job, like producing skills for the job market and also research as knowledge generators? We just did this study about strengthening levers to inclusivity of African scholars across the research to evidence use pipeline. And something that we see is oftentimes faculty in higher ed and African institutions are also often very constrained by money and time. So I'm really curious, because you talked about staff development, how you're thinking about paying and incentivizing your staff so that they're not seeking external consultancies that decreases the amount of time that they can do for student supervision, really fostering that young talent. And also like the extent to which, if you are grow in research, how you'll think about the role of like research administration to handle these large grants. Anyways, we can talk more, but I'm so excited by
We
this.
love you guys.
So I'll talk a little bit about the relationship with the government, and then I will hand over to because as you can see, I'm sitting between two PhDs. It was strategic, because I'm more the strategy sort of person. And of course, this is an important question to ask because we have a president who has been in power for 40 years. So really, we can't say that our politics works, although we find a way of managing. So one of the things that we've realized is that when an institution focuses on excellence, then one thing becomes undeniable, that they have the results, that their students are actually doing transformative work. And that gives you some kind of latitude and freedom to actually, for your voice to be heard. We've seen it with Ashesi, for example, and how over the years, eventually, even governments that might not necessarily be in the beginning, very receptive to actually say, wait a minute, this actually works. These young people that come out of this university are employed within, 98% of them are employed within 9 months of graduating. And when they are employed, their employers are happy with their output and they are ethical. So maybe if this university has something to say, maybe we should listen, because they are actually delivering on the policy. So I think that's going to be the focus, that just focus on the work and the output, because that never lies. The outcome of that cannot be ignored, and it speaks for itself. The other thing is, especially in a sort of volatile, political situation, how do you walk that delicate line where you're not compromised and you are able to continue with your work? Again, it ties back to this thing of focusing on the work. And sometimes that might mean that my work is more important than my opinion, than my thoughts, than, for example, my political stance. The day I started Musizi, I went to my social media, I deleted anything I had ever said about my president. I was like, because quite frankly, What change had my opinions on whether I think he's a good president or not made? Nothing. Except to, if they would then be found, then make Musizi a victim of. It's not important. What I think about my president is not more important than the work that needs to be done. So it's going to require a very delicate walk, and sometimes it will require that we are silent on certain things. But one of the wonderful things is I read a book called Education as a Tool of Rebellion. And I'm strongly inclined to believe that it is perhaps by far the more effective tool. Because as I am doing it, nobody knows. And I can just get on with it. And the wonderful thing about it is if it yields excellence, they have no choice. Because guess what? They also need things to work. So that's going to be our approach. To be apolitical, really. But in so doing, that will, as long as we focus on excellence, that will allow us the intellectual freedom to speak the truth. Yeah.
And I just wanted to give an example of how this could happen through what we've learned from Shesi. Because when Shesi was trying to get accredited by their government, there was a lot of pushback against the liberal arts model. They were like, why does a computer scientist have to learn humanities and social sciences, philosophy? There was a lot of kind of misunderstanding of the utility of that. But just recently, the same government that pushed back against the liberal arts is now encouraging other universities in Ghana to incorporate more of the liberal arts courses within their curriculum. So, and that's after 20 years of operations. I think for us, it's going to take us some time to get to that level.
I was just joking. We're trying to get the school launched. We're flattered you're asking about research papers and PhD. Shesi, we had a board meeting Friday and Saturday, and we're 23 years into it, and really this is one of kind of our most important kind of agenda items right now. And one of the things we're doing is bifurcating. Not every professor wants to do research, so we are paying for individual research. We're cognizant about not creating unintended consequences that people do research just to get paid, so there's kind of a balance there. And we are paying professors to go out and get PhDs, take sabbaticals and do that, so there's dedicated funding for it. But again, we didn't start kind of grappling with some of that stuff till we were 20 years into it, and really had the sources of funding for it.
So just to share how we're thinking about it so far. So this is the reason why we started a research institute ahead of the university. Because we realized that if we wanted to build curriculum that was tailored to the needs of the students and the economy that they were going to go into, we actually needed to do research and to understand those needs ourselves. So this is how we started the Sustainable Business Institute ahead of the university, and then started writing these business case studies. And all of that feeds back into the teaching within the classroom too. So in this whole research institute idea, we actually got from Claremont McKenna College, because I think there's about 20 research institutes just in Claremont. And I think that's a great model where basically faculty are attached to different research institutes that kind of correspond to their niche, and then are able to dedicate some of their time, I think with some additional pay, to engage in research along with their teaching responsibilities too. So it's somewhere where I think we can get a lot of guidance from SIGA and learn from other institutions, and something we really are passionate about. So thank you for mentioning that.
Hey, I'm Jeremiah Chapman. I'm here on behalf of Black Culture Weekly, by extension of that, Black Culture Academy Uganda. So I already work with students in Uganda in the Kampala area. We just purchased some property in the Nakayuga area, and so I'm just like want to figure out a way to work with y'all. The open question is how do I partner? Basically, the land that we purchased is just kind of sitting there right now, and so we're just trying to figure out a use for it. And so I'm like, hey, I saw this on the Young Black San Francisco channel, and I was like, hey, let me figure out.
I remember who that was.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.
So just wanted to figure out what's the process of supporting you all, partnering, and what that is.
We have your information.
Okay.
So glad that you made it here tonight. Let's continue the conversation because there's so much opportunity. Musizi is at a place where it's so ripe for so much collaboration, and we want to do things right. But we definitely want to collaborate as much as possible. Remember, we want to be a friend of Musizi. Let's keep in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah. I think there's another question. Maybe take one more in the interest of time.
Yeah, mine's gonna be quick, so I'll just segue to like what Jen said. I'm Kyle, I think reality correspondent. Thank you for the invite. I wanted to also ask, like, how do professionals, right? Because I'm looking at the curriculum, I'm an engineer. How do you also put in that like sweat equity, right? Like to help, if there's any way to collaborate in competition, like more hands-on engineering support, would that be something that you guys are exploring?
Absolutely. Like, we've gotten this far because of collaboration and partnering with so many amazing individuals who bring their different skill sets to help really guide us in our thinking. So we welcome all of that, and we would be so happy to work with both the engineering background too. So thank you so much.
And the other thing is that we also have inbuilt a strong mentorship model, because remember that we don't necessarily have the sort of mentors available within the market that would be able to speak to these students to get them to that level. So yes, we definitely will be building that sort of network, and we already have actually a number of Ugandans in the diaspora who have signed up to volunteer in this way, to like mentor students in engineering. We had a Ugandan engineer at Facebook who put together a team of 20. He's like, where are my students? We're like, sir, we are sorry, we are not ready. But that just goes to show you that definitely there's space, and we look forward to more conversations. So, if not, okay, so I think this is the good part.
Yeah.
Do we have any more comments?
Okay, any more questions?
Chris or Krisha, did you want to say anything? Chris, did you want to say anything?
No. You guys have done a great job sharing what I've seen and what I've been fortunate to connect with in the last 4 years since we have formed our foundation. I'm excited we're finally here sharing it and finding new supporters. It's great. It's a great time. Thank you.
So before we leave, we would like to give each one of you a gift to thank you for making the time to be here. Uganda is one of the top 10 coffee producers in the world. So we are doing something really well. And one of the interesting things about our coffee is that the Musizi tree actually is a tree that you will see predominantly in our coffee plantations. So we wanted you to carry home with you some coffee that might possibly have grown under a Musizi tree, so that you get a taste of our goodness, and and just spread the love, and to just thank you for spending your time with us. Now, we started off by asking for an idea.
Right? We've got a lot of good ideas. Yeah.
And I think that even as you leave tonight, there will be some ideas that will come to you. Please don't keep them to yourself. Write them down and share them with us. And enjoy some Ugandan coffee. And thank you so much for being here. And also, I would like to ask that you join us in thanking Neil, who moderated this conversation for us. We were kind of like, oh my God, Neil, what do we do? How do we do it? He's like, no, I'll just ask you a couple of questions. You can hear how calm he is. He brings that calmness to us from time to time. So Neil, we'd like to thank you very much for you.
By the way, we're doing a repeat of this tomorrow night at my house in Mill Valley. If you have any friends in Marin, we don't have a ton of space. We've got about 35 people coming, so it's going to be cozy. But if you have a friend or two in Marin that would be interested, we'd be happy to have them.
So, yeah.